In this video, we're going to set up Mailgun and we're going to send an API request to Mailgun via our Firebase Functions API. So I wanted to start off by mentioning that the previous video, video 2, can be checked out by running git checkout video 2. Okay. With that said, the first thing I want to start off with is talking about Mailgun. So for those who don't know, really quickly, Mailgun is a service for sending to one or many emails programmatically. So it's an API to deliver emails. So this is what we're going to use to send emails and also to manage a mailing list. So the first thing you need to do, if you already haven't done so, is to create a Mailgun account. You will get asked to enter your credit card information, but don't worry, you won't get charged. If you're wondering about that, the differences between entering and not entering your card are important because in our case, we're going to be sending with your own domain. So ideally, you have your own domain, and I'll talk about that in a second. But if for whatever reason, let's say you don't have a credit card or you don't have a domain, that's okay. You can still follow along. You can use what's called authorized recipients. So I won't be using it, but you can if you want to go down that route, which is you can send to up to 5 recipients. So for example, if you want to send an email to bob@example.com, you have to first add that email to Mailgun. Mailgun's going to send an email to Bob. Bob's going to get asked, hey, do you accept receiving emails from this sandbox domain? And if Bob says yes, then Bob can start receiving emails. So the way that you would do that is you would simply add your own email. So if my email was geo@example.com, I would add my own email, I'd receive an email and accept it. So you can definitely do that for the sake of being more sort of thorough in this video. I'm going to be using my own domain. So, and I'll post all the links down below. So once you sign up, you enter your credit card information, or you don't. That's okay. Oh yeah, the other thing is I wanted to really quickly cover this again. So you won't get charged at all. Let me mention that. Where is it? You won't get charged at all for the first 3 months, and then any additional messages are charged at a rate of 80 cents for every 1,000 emails. So I think you'll be okay. So sign up, and what's the other thing? Once you are signed up and you do have a domain, again, I'm going to link this down below. You're going to have to take 5 minutes. It's pretty straightforward. Go to your DNS provider and set up some DNS records. There's ample documentation, but if you have any questions or anything, I'm always available to answer questions in the comments below. Again, all the links will be posted down below. So let's say you're already set up. The way that will look like. So let's check that out. This is the documentation. Do I have to log in? I'm logged in, and let me just reposition some windows here on my other screen. 1 second. Okay. So once you're logged in, you should see a similar dashboard as to the one that you're seeing right now. And you should also have a domain. If you don't, you will have already a default domain, such as this one. So mine is Sandbox and a whole bunch of other stuff. But I did already register my own domain. So I have a subdomain called ng, which just stands for Mailgun, and that is the domain that will be sending emails out to users. So the next thing we need to do is to get set up with our API keys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to the settings panel on the left hand side, and then I'm going to go to API keys. So there's 3 different API keys. We won't be using the second and the third keys. We'll only be using the first. So I'm going to reveal this to the entire world, even though you should never be doing this. By the time you see this video, these keys will have changed. But yeah, never show these sensitive things to the real world, or log them even. And then I'm going to go to my, what is it, env.ts. Actually, I need to open my env config or runtime config. So that's in, where is it, Firebase or functions? Runtime config, there we go. All right, so from the previous video, we had set up this environment file with a placeholder. Now we're going to actually add values to it. So the first one is going to be that API key I just copied. So I'm going to type in Mailgun API key. And by the way, these values must always be lowercase. And I'm going to enter that API token. There we go. So that's the first environment variable that we're going to use. And there's a second one, which is going to be that domain. So if you're following along with a sandbox, you would copy this entire sandbox domain. Let me see if I can figure that out. So yeah, I would copy this entire thing. Okay. In my case, I'm going to be using my actual domain, mg.gdelgado.ca, and I'm going to add a new value here, and I'm going to call it email sender domain. I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to delete. Yeah, I'm going to delete that placeholder now. Okay, so this is the actual environment variables we are going to be using for this video series. There is one last thing we need to do inside of Mailgun, which is to set up a mailing list. A newsletter would not be a newsletter if there wasn't a mailing list. So we're going to head over back to Mailgun. You're going to go into this sending tab, and then at the bottom of that tab there should be an option that says mailing lists. So take a few moments, so it should take you no longer than a minute or 2 minutes, pardon me, to set up this newsletter. Okay, so once you've set up your own newsletter, the name of my newsletter is simply called newsletter. Okay, if I click here, you'll see that, where is it? Yeah, so you simply have the name for the newsletter, and then the domain that you had registered. Okay, so once that's done and you have your mailing list set up, we can start coding. So let's see here. So our goal for this video is to send an API request to Mailgun and register a subscriber for our mailing list. So let's go into, oh, what did I do? Oh, I was typing in the wrong screen. Let's see here. So I'm going to create a new file. So inside functions src, there's going to be a new file called email. Okay, and I'm going to be exporting a function called add subscriber to mailing list, and it's going to take an email, which I'm going to say it's a string, and it's going to do something asynchronous. And because it's going to do something asynchronous, I'm going to be using promises. I don't want to return anything yet to the consumer of this, and for now I'm going to leave this blank. But that's sort of like the interface I want to have. In order to actually send HTTP requests and sending data as Mailgun expects, so user manual, let's see here. Let's see here. So it's a post request somewhere. Is this the right thing? No. API reference, mailing lists. All right. So post list address. Where is it? Validate pages. All right. This is what we're looking for. Post lists address members. And we're going to send the email address of our member. Okay. The address for this URL represents the mailing list address. So with that said, and again, I'll post these docs down below. We need two libraries. The first one is Axios. I'm going to be using a very handy-dandy HTTP module to make it easy to send HTTP requests. And the other one is called form data. Form data encodes our JavaScript data into, I forget what the header or data type is called. It's like X www URL and what is it? URL form encoded. Let's see. Yeah, form URL encoded. That's simply the data that Mailgun expects. So we're going to adhere to that using form data. It's a very simple, straightforward way of doing that. So without further ado, I'm going to go into functions and I'm going to npm install Axios and form data like so. Both of these packages have their own type definitions already, so you don't need to also install like an @types / Axios or @types / form data. The types are already there for you. Okie dokie. So going back to our code, we can now do import Axios from Axios and import star as form data from form data. The different import semantics or syntax is simply because of the way the packages are structured. Don't worry too much about that. And the other thing we need is our environment variables. So I'm going to do import. Did we already? Oh, I just realized we didn't add the environment variables. So let's do that. So I'm going to go into here, into env, and if you recall from our last video, we hadn't modified this yet. We just had that placeholder. So now we need our actual values. So our actual values are Mailgun API token. Yeah, is that what I have? Let's see. API key. Let's be consistent here. So key, and then this is going to be Mailgun API key. And let me just, I was going to zoom, scroll up a little bit so you can see. Email sender domain equals verify env. Email sender domain. That's correct, right? Email sender domain, Mailgun API key. That looks about right. Great. So with that done, we can now import our environment variables, email sender domain and Mailgun API key. I'm also going to have a hard-coded value for my newsletter, but in your case it might be a environment variable as well. But because I'm going to only have one single newsletter, I'm going to simply do this. Mailing or newsletter name is equal to newsletter. But yeah, in a more realistic environment, you might want to copy this or something, or have two different environment variables, and one of them would be like newsletter, and then the other one might be like dev.newsletter or something. In my case, I'm not going to go ahead and do that, but yeah, you can go for it if you want to. So now we have this add subscriber to mailing list function that we've exported, and now we need to implement it. So this implementation is going to be pretty straightforward, and then throughout the video series, we're going to refactor. So I don't like over-engineering. I don't like getting ahead of myself. If I can keep something simple, I definitely will. And then as the needs change for a team or for myself, I start extrapolating data or values and abstracting away for a cleaner, more maintainable, and also testable API. So for now, it's going to be very straightforward. There's not going to be even error handling for now. Form data. Okay, so we have our form, and now we can start adding data into this form. So right now, this is a purely empty thing of data. I don't know what you want to call it. And then I'm going to append to it. So this is the API. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say subscribed. Whoops. And I think the value must be yes. Yeah. I'm going to be explicit. So the documentation says that they by default will set the user as subscribed, but I'm going to be explicit and add that data anyways in my API request. I think it's good practice anyways. subscribed. And then the other thing that is required is the email address of the subscriber. So the API documentation expects a parameter called address, and it's going to be our email. Okay. So that's what we have so far. Then we need an actual endpoint. So remember, we have this path, but there's also a base URL that we need to know about. I'm going to hard code it here for now. So that endpoint is HTTPS : // I'm going to use the American domain, but there is a European one as well, which I will also link to down below. Let me actually find it super quickly. There you go. Base URL. So there's two. In fact, I'm just going to copy this. But like I was mentioning, there is a European one as well, depending on where you are in the world and where your users are. So if you're, say, for example, in Asia, you probably want to depend on the European servers. They're closer to where you are. Okay, so we have our endpoint, and the path is this. So lists address members. So lists, I should be using the other kind of string, so just give me 1 second. Let's change that right now, actually. There we go. So now I can interpolate this string, specify my mailing list, which I haven't declared yet, mailing list. So sorry about that. I'm going to declare a variable called mailing list in a second. And then the last part is members. So that's our endpoint. Okay, so let me quickly declare this mailing list variable. Mailing list is equal to newsletter name, right? At email sender domain. Okay, so where did I get this from? If I go back to my dashboard and I go to mailing lists, which, yeah, here I am, this is what I'm trying to create. So Mailgun knows, oh, you're going to send to the users inside of this mailing list. So we have our mailing list, we have our endpoint, or sorry, I didn't mean to say send to our users in our mailing list because right now we're adding subscribers to our mailing list. But yeah, we would be adding people to this particular mailing list for this API request. And the last thing is to call Axios. So Axios, again, is an HTTP module, so I can declare a post request with this API, so axios.post. I can then specify the endpoint, the data, so the data is going to be the form, and then there's some configuration options. In fact, I'm going to await this just to make sure that if I do get a thrown exception, that well, I don't think I need to await it to actually see it come out in the logs, but in any case, I'll make this async anyways. Anyways, so in the configuration option, there's two fields we need to add. The first one is auth. So we're going to be using HTTP basic auth, which means we specify username and a password in the request itself. The username is API. That's simply what the documentation requires, or that's the interface of Mailgun. And the password is going to be your Mailgun API key. Okay, that's how Mailgun knows who we are. And then lastly, the other field is headers. So we're going to call form.getHeaders. And there we go. That is the complete add subscriber to mailing list function for now. The next thing I want to do is I want to go to index and call this function. So I'm going to do import from email. And it's called add subscriber to mailing list. I'm going to remove this import since we're actually using environment variables now. And I'm going to do await add subscriber to mailing list, and I'm going to say test@example.com. Okay, it's not there. Good. So I need to also make this async. And let's also change this. Let's just say successfully added user to mailing list. Great. Okay, so let's try it out. We have the compiler on one tab running in watch mode. So I've been saving my files and TypeScript has been picking it up and compiling it. And the emulator has been running this whole time. So it keeps restarting and we keep getting errors sometimes. But it's okay, it should be running now. So let's try it out. The URL is, I have already forgotten the URL. I'm going to do curl and I'm going to call it here. So so far so good. We've gotten a response from the server that says things are great. Let's check out our logs. Any errors? Nope, things look good. Also, again, friendly reminder, if you don't want to see the logs in your terminal, you can always see them in your emulator UI, which should be port 4000 / functions. There you go. It's about the same thing. It's a matter of preference. And the last thing is, let's check out Mailgun. Did it work? So there should be a new user here. Should be 3 recipients now. There we go, bob@example.com. So one other thing is, let's do this in production now. Let's actually try running this with a deployed Firebase function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to, I don't know, henry@example.com. And I'm not going to run it locally. I'm going to deploy it and then call it remotely, and then we're going to see if it worked. In fact, let's do this. Okay. Oops. User and successfully added user. Let's change these values here. Okay. So when we deploy it, it should say successfully added henry@example.com to mailing list. The other thing we need to do before we deploy is to actually set our environment variables for production. So remember that the local config, let's see, functions, runtime config. This local configuration is only local, right? So in a real world scenario, this API key would be different. So you would have like maybe different Mailgun accounts for different users and different domains as well, okay? So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to set my environment variables for the production environment. I'm going to copy my notes here. So the command, did I not copy it? It's okay. So here, I'll just type it out. Config set newsletter.mailgun API key is equal to. I'm going to copy this. Whoops, what did I do? Okay, paste it there. So we're setting one environment variable. And let me type this out again. The other one is email sender domain is equal to mg.gdelgado.ca. Great. So now we should be able to deploy. Feel free to fast forward at this point. The other thing is, what's it called? Oh yeah, I stream on Twitch every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, and it's almost always functional programming or Elm development, or even sometimes you'll see me working on the prep work for these video series. And what was the other thing? Oh, please like and subscribe. Oh, okay, great stuff. So we've successfully deployed. Now let's try it out. I'm gonna head over to my dashboard here on Firebase. I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna simply enter this here into my browser, and there we go. Henry was added to our mailing list. Let's refresh this, double check, and there we go. Henry has been added to the mailing list. So in our next video, we're going to be setting up a subscribe endpoint. And we're going to be making this a lot more sort of modular and scalable by using the Express.js HTTP web framework. As always, I'm going to be tagging this video. This video is going to be tagged as video 3. And please like and subscribe. See you later.